In the not-so-distant future, Earth's plant life has been nearly wiped out, safeguarded in a series of orbiting greenhouses located in the depths of space. Freeman Lowell, our protagonist, is one of 4 forest rangers assigned to the Valley Forge, a 2,000-meter-long greenhouse freighter. His mission, unlike those of his crewmates, is not merely a job, it's a deep passion, a calling to protect and nurture the last remnants of Earth's ecosystems. Unlike his crewmates, whose minds are focused on their imminent return to Earth after their 1-year deployment, Lowell's soul is intertwined with the greenhouses. The other 3 rangers seem indifferent to the fragile beauty surrounding them. They pass the time by racing and playing on the fields, often causing damage to the very gardens Lowell works so tirelessly to protect. Despite his frustration, Lowell chooses to let them be, quietly retreating into his duties. One day, this peace is shattered. A chilling order comes from their commanding officers. The mission is over. The crew is to abandon the greenhouses, destroy them with nuclear detonations, and redeploy the freighters for commercial use. The orbiting forests, the last remnants of Earth's natural world, are to be obliterated. Lowell is devastated by this command. While his crewmates are eager to return to Earth, he cannot bear the thought of destroying the precious life forms he has spent so long caring for. That evening, they gather in the mess hall. Lowell, as usual, eats a meal of fresh, nutrient-rich fruits he has grown himself, while his companions consume their synthetic, pre-packaged meals. They mock Lowell for his preference for dust-driven food, laughing at his commitment to nature, while he responds with barely contained anger. Deep down, the conversation cuts deeper than it seems. His frustration at their ignorance and his mounting dread about the order to destroy the greenhouses weighs heavily on him. Lowell believes that Earth's forests can be restored. He holds on to the hope that humanity might one day appreciate the natural world as they once did. But his crewmates are dismissive, ready to follow their orders without question. As they prepare to head to the greenhouse domes to begin the nuclear detonations, Lowell pleads with them to wait, to reconsider, but they ignore his protests. They proceed to jettison and detonate 4 of the 6 domes on the Valley Forge, one after another, with disturbing nonchalance. The explosions tear through the stillness of space, each blast marking the destruction of irreplaceable life. As one of his crewmates moves toward Lowell's own garden to set up the final detonation, something inside Lowell snaps. Armed with nothing but a shovel, Lowell lunges at him in a desperate attempt to stop the destruction. The 2 men struggle fiercely, rolling in the dust of the greenhouse. In the heat of the fight, Lowell manages to overpower his opponent, ultimately strangling him with the shovel in a fit of rage and desperation. Though victorious, Lowell is left with a deep gash in his leg, a painful reminder of the price he has paid. Despite his injury, Lowell limps back to the control room, determined to save what remains of the greenhouse domes. He traps the 2 remaining crew members inside one of the domes, and without hesitation, jettisons it into the cold expanse of space, detonating it just as they had done before. Now alone on the Valley Forge with only 2 remaining domes, Lowell turns to the ship's 3 robots, drones designed to perform maintenance tasks aboard the ship. These low-key, silent observers have witnessed the chaos unfold, and Lowell now has a plan to use them to his advantage. With the help of the robots, Lowell fakes a premature detonation, fooling his superiors into thinking the remaining greenhouses have been destroyed. He then alters the ship's course, setting it on a path towards Saturn, far from Earth and the fleet. His hope is to preserve the last dome, the final sanctuary of Earth's forests. Injured and alone, Lowell reprograms the robots to assist him, even instructing them to perform surgery on his wounded leg. Miraculously, the procedure is a success, and the robots, seemingly unfazed, continue their duties. As the Valley Forge approaches Saturn, Lowell receives one last transmission from the fleet, warning him that the ship is on a collision course with the planet's rings. They inform him that nothing can be done to prevent the impending disaster. Communications begin to fail as the distance between the ship and the rest of the fleet increases, leaving Lowell isolated in the depths of space. As the ship passes through the rings of Saturn, it is violently shaken. The force of the impact is tremendous, and Lowell watches in horror as one of the robots is blown away into space, lost forever. Only 2 remain. When the storm passes, the ship emerges on the other side, miraculously intact. The next morning, Lowell finds himself in the company of the 2 remaining robots. One tends to the plants in the greenhouse, while the the other watches over Lowell through its external cameras. Realizing he must now confront the grim reality of his actions, Lowell has the robots dig a grave for the crewmate he killed in the heat of the moment. He feels a deep sense of guilt, but he tells himself he had no other choice. After burying the body, Lowell says a quiet prayer, seeking some measure of absolution. From that moment on, Lowell accepts his fate. With only the two remaining robots for company, he renames them Huey and Dewey, posthumously honoring the lost robot as Louie. Together, they chart a course into the unknown, deep into space, far away from the fleet that abandoned Earth's last hope. Lowell, now a lone guardian of the forest, befriends the robots and teaches them how to tend the plants, even though their efforts are clumsy at first. He shows them how to plant trees and water them, preparing for a future he hopes may come, even if it's one he will never see. Later, Lowell ventures outside the ship to inspect the exterior. While wandering, he stumbles upon the remaining parts of Louie, the third robot who had been blown away during the ship's passage through Saturn's rings. He gathers the broken pieces and, back inside the ship, solemnly shows them to Huey and Dewey, cautioning the remaining robots to be more careful and to avoid meeting the same fate as their fallen companion. Though he tries to mask his emotions, the loss of Louie weighs heavily on Lowell. The isolation is starting to seep in more deeply now, and he finds himself missing the presence of his former crewmates, even their annoying habits. Lowell remembers how the others used to pass time by racing the buggies around the greenhouse, so in a moment of nostalgia, he decides to race alone, just like they used to. However, without the same skill or reckless confidence, he quickly realizes he's not as adept as they were. He loses control and crashes into one of the soil containers, jarring the vehicle and knocking himself off balance. Frustrated and disappointed, he retreats to the control room, his mood darkening further. Sitting in the quiet control room, Lowell attempts to distract himself and decides to seek out the company of the robots. In an attempt to lift his spirits, he programs them to play poker with him. To his surprise, Huey and Dewey prove to be surprisingly good at the game, their programmed responses mimicking human strategy and wit. For the first time in what feels like forever, Lowell feels a hint of joy. Their quirky, robotic ways of playing cheer him up in a way he hadn't expected. After several rounds of poker, Lowell starts to feel hungry. With a sudden curiosity, he decides to try the synthetic food his crewmates used to eat, the very meals they always bragged about. As he takes a bite, he immediately recoils. It's worse than he imagined, bland and tasteless. Disgusted, he quickly discards it, reaffirming his loyalty to real food. With a sigh, he heads back to his beloved forest to harvest fresh produce, something that would actually satisfy him. But when he arrives, his heart sinks. The once thriving plants are wilting, and the vibrant life he worked so hard to protect is now slowly dying. Desperately, Lowell gathers a few leaves and rushes to the lab. He places the samples under the microscope, scrutinizing them for any sign of disease or contamination. Despite his best efforts, he can't determine what's killing his forest. Frustration mounts, and panic begins to set in. Exhausted and anxious, Lowell decides to take matters into his own hands. Climbing into one of the ship's buggies, Lowell speeds toward the dome in a rush, eager to find the cause of the devastation. But in his haste, he loses control of the buggy once again, this time crashing into Huey at high speed. The impact is severe. Huey's robotic body crumples under the force of the collision. Panic floods Lowell as he rushes over to the fallen robot, inspecting the damage. Huey is badly broken, wires and parts scattered, and Lowell immediately sets to work trying to repair him. But despite his best efforts, the damage is too extensive. Huey remains unresponsive, and Lowell, defeated, can do nothing but watch as his companion malfunctions, leaving him with only Dewey for company. Meanwhile, the forest continues to deteriorate. No matter what Lowell tries, he cannot stop the plants from withering away. The dome, once lush and green, is now a fading memory of what it once was. As days turn into weeks, Lowell begins to accept the grim truth. His mission is failing. He cannot save the forest. Just as his hope is dwindling, faint radio chatter crackles through the ship's communication system. After weeks of silence, a rescue party from the Valley Forge's sister ship, the Berkshire, has located the freighter. They inform Lowell that they will reach him within 6 hours. Relief and dread wash over him in equal measure. The rescue team instructs him to jettison the greenhouse dome, but they warn him not to detonate the nuclear charge, as it is too dangerous to do so in the dark. It is during this final communication that the realization hits Lowell. The forest is dying due to the lack of sunlight. The dome, too far from any natural light source, has been slowly suffocating without the energy it needs to sustain life. Determined to make one last effort, Lowell rushes to activate the ship's artificial light system. He sets up a series of powerful lamps, hoping to simulate sunlight and buy more time for the dying plants. With Dewey by his side, he gives the robot one final command: just maintain the forest. The words feel heavy, as if he knows this will be his last request. Lowell, fully aware that his crime of killing his crewmates will be uncovered when the Berkshire arrives, makes a difficult decision. He jettisons the last dome, sending it drifting safely into space, away from the doomed Valley Forge. As he watches it float away, he speaks softly to Dewey: take good care of the forest. With the Berkshire only 2 hours from docking, Lowell and the damaged Huey sit together in the control room. The ship, now silent, feels like a tomb. In his final moments, Lowell arms the last of the nuclear charges, knowing that his time has come to an end. He reflects on a distant memory telling the robot that when he was a kid, he put a note into a bottle with his name and address on it. Then he threw it into the ocean. He says he never knew if anyone ever found it. As the timer ticks down, Lowell prepares to sacrifice himself to ensure the safety of the last forest. The Valley Forge is destroyed in a brilliant explosion, the nuclear charge obliterating the ship and everything on board. The final scene is hauntingly serene. The last greenhouse dome, bathed in warm, artificial light, drifts silently through space. Dewey, the sole surviving robot, tends to the plants with a battered watering can, ensuring that the forest lives on. The story ends with this quiet image, a lone robot keeping humanity's final gift alive among the stars.